Every civilization believes it will last forever. Every empire imagines its monuments will outlive the stars. Every king believes that history will remember his name. But time remembers no one. It buries kingdoms beneath oceans, swallows cities beneath deserts, and turns even the greatest rulers into forgotten dust. Yet, among all the civilizations humanity has ever built, one stood taller than the rest. A kingdom so magnificent, so advanced, so mysterious, that even today, thousands of years after its fall, it continues to captivate the imagination of millions. This was ancient Egypt. Pause. Picture yourself standing alone in the middle of an endless sea of golden sand. The scorching desert wind brushes against your face. The air is silent until, in the distance, massive stone giants slowly emerge from the shimmering horizon. The pyramids, structures so enormous that modern engineers still debate how they were built. They have stood for more than 4,000 years. They watched kingdoms rise, religions spread, empires collapse, and entire civilizations disappear, while they remained silent, unmoving, eternal. But Egypt was never only about pyramids. It was a civilization where mathematics shaped impossible architecture, where physicians practiced medicine centuries before much of the world understood disease, where astronomers mapped the heavens with astonishing precision, and where every stone carried stories carved for eternity. The Nile River, more than a river, was the heartbeat of an empire. Every year, its waters flooded the land, leaving behind rich black soil that transformed lifeless desert into fertile paradise. To the Egyptians, this wasn't merely nature, it was divine, a gift from the gods themselves. While much of humanity struggled to survive, Egypt flourished. The cities expanded. Trade routes stretched across continents. Gold flowed from Nubia. Cedar arrived from Lebanon. Every incense, precious stones, exotic animals, all found their way into the kingdom. Wealth unlike anything the ancient world had ever witnessed poured into the land of the pharaohs. And with that wealth came unimaginable ambition. The pharaoh was not simply a king. He was believed to be a living god, the bridge between heaven and earth. His word carried the weight of divine law. His enemies were considered enemies of the gods themselves. Every monument, every temple, every colossal statue was built not only to honor his reign, but to ensure that his name would survive forever. Because in ancient Egypt, death was never the end. It was merely the beginning of another journey. Imagine the day a pharaoh died. Thousands gathered in absolute silence. Priests dressed in white linen chanted sacred prayers. The scent of incense filled the air. Golden treasures sparkled beneath the desert sun. Skilled embalmers worked carefully, preparing the ruler for eternity. Every organ removed with extraordinary precision. Every linen bandage wrapped with ritual. Every amulet placed exactly where tradition demanded. They believed the soul would awaken once again, in another world, a world where the pharaoh would continue to rule forever. And so, they built tombs unlike anything humanity had ever seen. But greatness always comes with a price. Behind the glittering temples, behind the golden masks, behind the towering pyramids, cracks were already beginning to form, invisible at first, small enough to ignore. Yet history has shown that the mightiest empires rarely fall because of a single catastrophe. They collapse. One mistake, one drought, one war, one generation at a time. The story of ancient Egypt is not simply the story of glory. It is the story of ambition, faith, power, pride, and ultimately, human fragility. Over the next several thousand years, Egypt would face invasion, civil war, betrayal, economic collapse, religious revolution, foreign conquest, and the relentless march of time itself. The civilization that once believed itself eternal would slowly, painfully, fade into history. But before an empire can fall, it must first rise. And that rise begins beside a river more than 5,000 years ago, along the fertile banks of the Nile, where a handful of farming villages were about to change the course of human civilization forever. Long before the pyramids reached toward the heavens, before mighty pharaohs ruled with absolute power, before golden temples echoed with sacred prayers, there was only a river flowing silently through an endless desert, the Nile. To the people who lived along its banks, it was more than water. It was life itself. Every summer, as rains fell thousands of kilometers away in the Ethiopian highlands, the Nile swelled beyond its banks. Its muddy waters spread across the land, leaving behind rich black soil, a miracle repeated every single year. While surrounding deserts remained harsh and unforgiving, the Nile Valley transformed into a ribbon of green. Crops flourished, villages grew, families prospered, and for the first time, humans no longer lived only to survive. They began to dream. Those dreams changed everything. Farmers became craftsmen. Craftsmen became merchants. Merchants connected distant settlements through trade. Soon, small villages became thriving communities. Mud brick homes lined the riverbanks. Children laughed beneath groves of date palms. Fishing boats drifted across calm waters. Granaries overflowed with wheat and barley. For generations, the Nile rewarded those who respected its rhythm. But prosperity brought competition. As villages expanded, leaders emerged. Each sought to control fertile land, water, trade, and people. Peace gradually gave way to rivalry. Neighbor fought neighbor. Clan challenged clan. Small conflicts grew into regional wars. Across the Nile Valley, two powerful kingdoms slowly took shape. Upper Egypt in the south, Lower Egypt in the north. For centuries, they stood divided, watching each other, preparing for the day when only one crown would remain. Then, around 3100 BC, history changed forever. A king rose from the south. His name, Narmer, warrior, strategist, visionary. He marched north with disciplined armies, not merely to conquer, but to unite. Battle after battle, his forces advanced, until finally, Upper and Lower Egypt became one kingdom. For the first time in history, a single ruler governed the entire Nile. The double crown became the symbol of unity. A new nation was born. Narmer's victory was more than military triumph. It created stability. Laws were established. Taxes organized. Massive irrigation canals expanded agriculture. Skilled scribes recorded harvests on papyrus. Engineers surveyed the land with astonishing precision. Trade stretched beyond Egypt's borders. Gold arrived from Nubia. Cedar wood crossed the Mediterranean. Incense, ivory, and precious stones flowed into royal storehouses. Egypt was no longer a collection of villages. It had become one of humanity's first great civilizations. Yet, something even greater was taking shape. The pharaoh was no longer seen as merely a king. He became the living embodiment of divine order. Every sunrise, every flood, every successful harvest was believed to reflect the harmony he maintained between humanity and the gods. To challenge the pharaoh was to challenge the universe itself. Across the kingdom, thousands of laborers, architects, artists, priests, and engineers began building monuments unlike anything the world had ever imagined. Not for vanity alone, but to prove that Egypt had become eternal. Stone by stone, generation after generation, the foundations of history were being laid. Yet, no civilization, no matter how powerful, escapes the test of time. As Egypt entered an age of extraordinary wealth, new ambitions emerged. And among those ambitions, one ruler would dare to build a monument so impossible that thousands of years later, humanity would still stand before it in awe. The Great Pyramid was about to rise. There are moments in history when humanity dares to attempt the impossible. Not because it is easy, but because it believes that greatness is worth every sacrifice. More than 4,500 years ago, in the blazing deserts of Egypt, one man dreamed of immortality. His name was Khufu, the second pharaoh of Egypt's fourth dynasty. His kingdom stretched farther than any ruler before him. His wealth was beyond imagination. His authority was absolute. Yet despite all his power, Khufu feared the one enemy no king could defeat: time. Every sunrise reminded him that another day of his life had vanished. Every funeral reminded him that even the mightiest rulers eventually became dust. But Khufu refused to disappear into history. He wanted something greater, something eternal. A monument so extraordinary that generations yet unborn would speak his name with awe. And so, he gave an order that would change the world forever. Build me a stairway to eternity. Across Egypt, royal messengers carried the pharaoh's command. Architects, engineers, master stonecutters, surveyors, craftsmen, and thousands upon thousands of laborers answered the call. They gathered on a rocky plateau overlooking the Nile, a place the world now knows as Giza. Before a single stone could be laid, the land itself had to be transformed. Surveyors measured every angle with astonishing precision. The foundation was leveled to within mere centimeters, aligned almost perfectly with the four cardinal directions: north, south, east, west, a level of accuracy that still astonishes engineers today. Then came the stone, millions of limestone blocks, some weighing more than 15 tons, quarried by hand, cut with copper tools, dragged across the desert on massive wooden sledges. Every movement demanded teamwork. Every mistake could cost lives. Under the relentless Egyptian sun, men pushed beyond exhaustion, day after day, month after month, year after year. Not slaves, as myths once claimed, but skilled workers, farmers during the Nile's flood season, craftsmen, builders, united by duty, faith, and loyalty to their king. Imagine standing among them. The sound of chisels striking stone echoes across the plateau. Foremen shout commands. Dust fills the air. Wooden sledges groan beneath impossible weight. Priests offer prayers before each new section begins. Thousands of hands move as one. Every block lifted, every ramp extended, every measurement checked again and again. This was more than construction. It was choreography. a masterpiece of human organization. As the years passed, the pyramid climbed higher, 50 meters, 100, then higher still. Its gleaming white limestone casing reflected the Egyptian sun like a second sunrise. Travelers approaching from miles away described it as a mountain of light, a monument unlike anything the world had ever seen. It towered over temples, cities, and the imaginations of everyone who witnessed it. Deep inside, hidden passageways wound through solid stone. Narrow corridors led toward chambers sealed from the outside world. The king's chamber, built from enormous granite blocks, transported hundreds of kilometers from Aswan. Every passage, every shaft, every chamber was designed with astonishing precision. Even today, historians continue debating their true purpose. Were they symbolic pathways to the stars, ventilation shafts, or sacred passages guiding the pharaoh's soul into eternity? The pyramid still guards its secrets. More than 20 years after construction began, the impossible became reality. The Great Pyramid stood complete, rising nearly 147 meters into the sky, the tallest structure on Earth, a record it would hold for almost 4,000 years. Generations came and went, empires rose and fell, yet the pyramid endured, silent, immovable, watching history unfold. To Khufu, the pyramid was proof that his reign would never be forgotten. And in many ways, he was right. Thousands of years later, millions still travel across the world, simply to stand before the monument he imagined, to touch the stones, to wonder how ancient hands accomplished what still seems impossible. Yet, while the pyramid appeared eternal, Egypt itself was beginning to change. Behind the dazzling monuments, new ambitions, new rulers, and new conflicts were already reshaping the future. The Golden Age had reached its peak, and history teaches us every peak is followed by a descent. Every empire has its golden age, a moment when its power seems limitless, when its wealth appears endless, when its rulers believe that nothing can ever bring them down. For ancient Egypt, that moment had arrived. The Great Pyramid stood as a symbol of unmatched ambition. The Nile continued to nourish the land. Harvests filled enormous granaries. Gold poured into royal treasuries. Egypt was no longer simply surviving. It was thriving. Across the ancient world, no kingdom shone brighter. From the Mediterranean coast to the scorching deserts of Nubia, Egypt's influence stretched across thousands of kilometers. Merchant ships sailed along the Nile carrying grain, papyrus, fine linen, precious stones, and handcrafted treasures. Foreign kings eagerly sought friendship with the pharaoh. Ambassadors arrived bearing gifts of silver, rare animals, cedar wood, incense, and exotic spices. Egypt had become the center of the ancient world. The cities flourished. Magnificent temples rose toward the heavens. Towering obelisks reflected the morning sun. Sacred lakes mirrored towering columns carved with stories of gods and kings. Every wall, every pillar, every statue was covered with hieroglyphs. They were more than decorations. They were messages meant to survive forever. At the heart of this magnificent civilization stood the pharaoh. More than a ruler, more than a king, he was believed to be chosen by the gods themselves. Every victory in battle, every successful harvest, every peaceful year was seen as proof that divine order still existed. The people did not simply obey him, They worshipped him. Yet Egypt's greatness was not built by kings alone. Across the kingdom, thousands of architects, sculptors, engineers, priests, farmers, soldiers, and scribes worked together like the gears of an enormous machine. The scribes recorded every harvest. Engineers designed canals that carried life across the desert. Farmers fed millions. Soldiers guarded trade routes. Every citizen played a part in building an empire that seemed unstoppable. Then came one of Egypt's greatest warrior kings, Thutmose III, a military genius. Campaign after campaign, he expanded Egypt's borders farther than ever before. His armies crossed mountains. They marched through deserts. They conquered mighty cities, bringing unimaginable wealth back to Egypt. Gold, horses, chariots, rare treasures flowed into royal palaces. Egypt reached the height of its military power. But not every great ruler carried a sword. Some ruled with wisdom, others with vision. One of them was Hatshepsut, one of history's most extraordinary queens. In a world ruled almost entirely by men, she dared to wear the crown of Pharaoh. Instead of endless wars, she invested in trade. Massive expeditions sailed to the mysterious land of Punt, returning with incense trees, gold, ivory, exotic animals, and riches beyond imagination. Under her rule, Egypt prospered in peace. Then came Ramses II, the king history would remember as Ramses the Great. His reign lasted more than 60 years. During that time, gigantic temples were carved directly into mountains. Colossal statues bearing his image rose across the kingdom. His victories were carved into stone. His name echoed through every corner of Egypt. To later generations, he became the very image of a pharaoh. But beneath the glory, beneath the festivals, beneath the monuments, tiny fractures had begun to spread. The empire had grown vast, too vast. Maintaining distant territories demanded enormous wealth. Monumental construction never stopped. Royal courts became increasingly expensive. Political rivalries quietly intensified. Corruption crept into positions of power. Most people never noticed. After all, the empire still looked invincible, and that is often when civilizations become most vulnerable. History rarely announces the beginning of an empire's fall. It begins quietly. One failed harvest, one corrupt official, one ambitious rival, one drought, one generation at a time. Egypt had reached its highest peak, and somewhere beyond the horizon, forces were gathering that even the mighty pharaohs could not control. Every empire reaches a moment when its greatest enemy is no longer beyond its borders, but within them. Ancient Egypt had stood for nearly 2,000 years. It had built monuments that defied imagination. It had conquered mighty kingdoms. It had amassed unimaginable wealth. To the outside world, Egypt seemed eternal, but beneath the surface, the foundations were beginning to crack, and no one, not even the pharaoh, could stop what was coming. It began quietly. The Nile, the river that had sustained Egypt for countless generations, became unpredictable. Some years, the floods came too weak. Crops withered beneath the relentless sun. Other years, the waters rose too high. Entire villages disappeared beneath muddy currents. Granaries that once overflowed began to empty. Hunger spread across the land. Families abandoned their homes. Desperation replaced hope. As famine tightened its grip, faith began to weaken. For centuries, the pharaoh had been seen as the living guardian of divine order. If the Nile failed, had the gods abandoned Egypt, or had the pharaoh failed the gods? Questions once whispered in secret were now spoken openly. The unshakable authority of the throne began to crumble. Inside the royal court, power became a dangerous game. Noble families competed for influence. Priests grew richer than governors. Corrupt officials demanded heavier taxes, while ordinary people struggled merely to survive. Every palace hid conspiracies. Every temple concealed rivalries. Egypt was slowly tearing itself apart from within. Then, new enemies appeared beyond the horizon. The mighty Hittites challenged Egypt's power. The mysterious sea peoples swept across the eastern Mediterranean, destroying cities in their path. Trade routes collapsed. Ships disappeared. Precious goods no longer reached Egyptian ports. The empire that had once controlled international commerce found itself increasingly isolated. One by one, Egypt's distant territories broke away. Governors declared independence. Tributes stopped arriving. Garrisons were abandoned. The empire grew smaller, weaker, poorer. Yet the monuments still stood. Their silent grandeur hid the painful truth. Egypt was no longer the master of the ancient world. Then came the invaders. First the Libyans, then the Nubians. Later, the Assyrians marched south with an army unlike anything Egypt had faced. Their iron weapons shattered Egyptian resistance. Great cities fell. Temples were looted. Palaces burned. The empire that had once inspired fear now fought simply to survive. Yet Egypt refused to disappear. Again and again, it rose from the ashes. New dynasties restored temples. New pharaohs promised renewal. The people rebuilt what war had destroyed. For brief moments, hope returned. But history had already begun moving in another direction. Egypt could recover, but it could never fully reclaim its former glory. In 525 BC, a new conqueror arrived, Cambyses II, king of Persia. His armies crossed the Sinai Desert and marched toward the Nile. At the Battle of Pelusium, Egypt's defenses collapsed. The last native rulers were defeated. For the first time in its long history, Egypt became a province, ruled by a foreign empire. Nearly 2 centuries later, another young conqueror entered Egypt. His name was Alexander. The people welcomed him, not as an invader, but as a liberator. He founded a new city on the Mediterranean coast, Alexandria, a city that would become one of the greatest centers of knowledge the world had ever known. Yet, it was no longer the Egypt of the pharaohs. A new age had begun. Finally, one last queen fought to preserve what remained. Cleopatra VII. Brilliant, charismatic, determined, she forged alliances with Rome's most powerful leaders, hoping to save her kingdom. But destiny had other plans. After the Battle of Actium, her forces were defeated. In 30 BC, Cleopatra died, and with her, nearly 3,000 years of pharaonic rule came to an end. The throne fell silent. The crowns were laid aside. The age of the pharaohs was over. History is filled with forgotten kingdoms. Once, they ruled the world. Today, their names survive only in broken stones, faded manuscripts, and scattered ruins. But ancient Egypt was different. Even after its last pharaoh disappeared, Egypt refused to die. Empires conquered its land. Religions transformed its beliefs. Languages changed. Dynasties vanished. Yet something remained. Something timeless. Something eternal. Imagine standing before the Great Pyramid, just before sunrise. The desert is silent. The air is still. Then, the first rays of sunlight touch the ancient limestone. Suddenly, a monument built more than 4,500 years ago glows once again, exactly as it did when Pharaoh Khufu first gazed upon it. Generations have come and gone. Wars have been fought. Empires have risen and collapsed. Yet the pyramid remains, watching humanity pass by like grains of sand carried by the wind. But Egypt's greatest legacy was never simply its monuments. It was knowledge. Long before universities existed, Egyptian scribes mastered mathematics, astronomy, engineering, medicine, and architecture. They calculated the seasons by observing the stars. They designed irrigation systems that sustained millions. Their physicians recorded illnesses, performed surgeries, and developed treatments that influenced civilizations for centuries. Their understanding of geometry made possible structures that still challenge modern engineering. Their influence reached far beyond the Nile. The Greeks studied Egypt. The Romans admired Egypt. Scholars from across the ancient world traveled to Alexandria, home to one of the greatest libraries ever built. There, thousands upon thousands of scrolls preserved humanity's knowledge. Philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, geography, medicine, the wisdom of entire civilizations gathered beneath one roof. It became the intellectual heart of the ancient world. Yet, like every treasure created by mankind, even knowledge proved fragile. The Library of Alexandria was damaged, rebuilt, damaged again, until eventually, much of its priceless collection disappeared into history. Countless discoveries, lost forever, questions that may never be answered. What ideas vanished within those flames? What inventions were forgotten? What stories disappeared before anyone could remember them? Even today, Egypt continues to surprise us. Beneath the desert sands, archaeologists uncover forgotten tombs, hidden temples, buried cities, perfectly preserved mummies. Every discovery reveals another chapter. Every excavation raises even more questions. The deeper we search, the more mysterious Egypt becomes. Modern technology has allowed scientists to peer inside sealed chambers without moving a single stone. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, laser scanning, and particle detection continue revealing hidden spaces beneath temples, inside pyramids, and deep beneath the sands. Even now, Egypt still guards secrets that no one has fully understood. Perhaps that is why ancient Egypt continues to fascinate us. It reminds us that human ambition has no limits, that ordinary people working together can accomplish extraordinary things, that civilizations, no matter how powerful, are never permanent. Wealth fades, kings die, empires collapse, but ideas endure. Look once more at the Great Pyramid. It is not merely a tomb. It is a message sent across 45 centuries. From builders to the future, it whispers, "We were here, we dreamed, we believed, we built." And though our voices have long since faded, our story still lives Perhaps that is the greatest lesson ancient Egypt leaves behind. True immortality is not found in gold, nor in crowns, nor even in stone. It lives in knowledge passed from one generation to the next, in the courage to create, in the determination to leave the world better than we found it. And every time the sun rises over the pyramids, it reminds us that while civilizations may fall, greatness never truly disappears. So the next time you see the Great Pyramid standing beneath the endless Egyptian sky, remember, you are not simply looking at an ancient monument. You are looking at one of humanity's greatest achievements, a silent witness to thousands of years of triumph, tragedy, mystery, and hope. Ancient Egypt may have fallen, but its legacy will endure for as long as humanity remembers its story.